In 2012, 4 people were mysteriously killed while driving and cycling through the Alps. The deaths were of 2 separate, seemingly unrelated families, but the potential reasons and connections between these killings are, quite frankly, shocking. This is just one of the many mysteries we will be covering in this episode, so grab a drink. My choice today is English breakfast tea, and join me as we explore the unsolved mystery Iceberg. So we are on to tier 4 out of 11 of the Iceberg, and to start off with, we have the quote, "What does it do?" That's the beauty of it. It doesn't do anything. So this quote sounds really familiar to a lot of people. Even when I read this, I thought that it sounded familiar, but after extensively searching the internet, film listings, movie and TV quotes, and even radio shows, there doesn't really seem to be a direct source for this quote. The closest quote that someone has come up with is from an old black and white TV series called Burke's Law that aired in 1964.
Big one.
What is it?
Well, it's my therapy. I'm still perfecting it.
What does it do?
Do?
What's it for?
Well, nothing. I mean, that's the beauty of it. No, every machine in the world has something, but not mine. No.
But if you have some idea of where this quote might have come from, let me know in the comments below. The 12 Heidelberg fires were a series of 12 arson attacks on the artistic works of Tyree Guyton. He has a collection called the Heidelberg Project, which consists of one-of-a-kind creations that he started in 1973. When he returned from his military service, he was disappointed by the level of degradation and drabness on the street that he grew up on. So he decided to fix it up. He tidied up vacant houses and lots, replaced some of the windows and boards, and gave everything a fresh coat of paint. Over the years, he progressively turned these houses into essentially art pieces, both inside the houses and on the streets surrounding them. But not everyone loved his work, and there were a fair amount of people who saw the project as just a massive eyesore. So in 1991 and again in 1999, the city demolished some of the houses involved in this project for, as they put it, urban renewal. But Guyton didn't let that faze him, and he just kept on making them until 2013, when these now dubbed Heidelberg fires destroyed 8 of these homes. Arson attacks are apparently very hard to solve, and it is unlikely the culprit behind these attacks will ever really be caught. But Guyton said he just wants to go on creating and making art that people love and can look up to. The 2003 Ricin Letters. So ricin is a potent poison made from the seeds of the castor oil plant. It is extremely toxic if it is inhaled, injected, ingested, and even if ricin is in dust form and it enters through the eyes or broken skin, it can be extremely deadly. So it shouldn't come as a surprise that there was an emergency called when 2 letters laden with ricin were found between October and November 2003. One was mailed to the White House, and another was discovered in South Carolina with no address. The letters were sent and signed by someone who referred to themselves simply as the Fallen Angel, and the sender said that they owned a trucking company and that recent changes to trucking regulations had upset his business and angered him. So he sent the White House a letter containing ricin, which is a completely normal and rational thing to do. In 2004, police announced a $100,000 reward for information leading to the solving of the case. But as of today, that reward remains unclaimed. The Agogwe, also known as the Kakundakari or Kilomba in Zimbabwe and Congo, is a small human-like creature first spotted in the jungles of East Africa in 1900 by Captain William Hitchens. They stand between 2 and 5 feet tall, look eerily human, and have rust-colored hair covering their entire body. There hasn't been a sighting since the 1950s, but it's thought that they could have been a surviving species of Australopithecine, which was a very early form of human from over 2.5 million years ago. Alonzo Brooks was a 23-year-old man who went missing in 2004. He traveled to a party with 3 of his friends, roughly an hour from where he lived, and one by one throughout the night, his friends left the party, each assuming that someone else would give Alonzo a lift back home. Witnesses at the party say that racial slurs were thrown at Alonzo throughout the night, and that this might have started a fight at some point. The next day, when Alonzo didn't show at home, he was reported reported missing. Both the FBI and the KBI, or Kansas Bureau of Investigation, searched and could not find Brooks. So his family was allowed to search the property, and they found Alonzo on their first day. He was lying on the banks of a creek next to the house where he was last seen. They found no broken bones, no signs of blunt force trauma, and no signs of drowning, so his death was thought to be inconclusive. In 2020, the FBI reopened the case and issued a $100,000 reward for information, but it has not been claimed. It seems like Alonzo was likely stuck at the party with no way home, and something perhaps kicked off, and with everyone drinking, Alonzo unfortunately got caught up in it. It is a very sad case, but although there have been no major breakthroughs, the FBI say that they are doing everything they can to get to the bottom of this. But take that as you will. The Alps Murders were a strange, Sherlock-esque set of murders that took place in September 2012. 4 people were killed: an Iraqi tourist named Saad al-Hili, his wife Iqbal, her mother Sayla al-Alaf, and a French cyclist named Sylvain Molière. Saad's 2 daughters survived the attack, with one being shot in the shoulder but ultimately making a full recovery. As this name suggests, this attack took place in the Alps mountain range, and all of the victims were shot and found on a lay-by by a mountainside road. Saad and his family had apparently driven there, and Sylvain had cycled there. In 2007, after 5 years of investigating, the French police said they had no working theory to explain the murders and no suspects, which is just fantastic. Firstly, it's unclear which party was the intended target, whether it was Saad and his family and Sylvain was just in the wrong place, wrong time, or whether it was the other way around. Saad's family was found with the victims each shot twice in their head, in their car, which was in reverse gear with the doors locked shut. So perhaps they stopped to help someone, and when things went south, they tried to escape, maybe reversing away from the person, but they were just a little too late. Sylvain was found dead near the car, having been shot 7 times. So theories about this one are kind of wild. One theory was that this was the work of Saad's brother Saeed, with investigators stating that Saeed created a false will for his father and actually tried to withdraw £2 million from his father's Swiss bank account. So maybe a potential inheritance was the motive. Another theory was that Saad worked for various aerospace, energy, and chemical companies. So the theory says he potentially had some secrets that he maybe shouldn't have had. It was also reported that he might have had access to bank accounts that belonged to Saddam Hussein. So, was Saad killed to silence him and what he knew? Was Saad even potentially meeting with Sylvain to arrange some sort of transfer of information or even a sale? And if Sylvain was the target, it's a little unclear as to why, as he seemed to be just a regular local father of 3 who worked as a welder in a workshop. But government covers do exist. So the last major theory was that this was just the crazed work of a lone gunman or even a serial killer, as there didn't really seem to be any super obvious motive for the killings, and the gun that was used was later determined to be a pre-World War II Luger pistol, which was very unlikely to be used in a professional killing. There have been a few arrests since the incident, but all were eventually released, and whether this was a crime over inheritance, a calculated attack involving nuclear secrets, or just the mad actions of a lone gunman, we may never know. Anthonette Cayedito was a 9-year-old girl who went missing in 1986. This was in New Mexico, and Anthonette was a smart, responsible kid who, by the time she was 6, was cooking for her younger sisters, cleaning and ironing their clothes for the week, and just generally taking incredible care of them. She was described as having a caregiver's heart. Her favorite color was purple, and she was nicknamed Squirrel. So she was not only an incredible kid, but an incredible human. And on that fateful April night, Anthonette's mother, Penny, went to sleep, and when she woke up at 7 a.m., Anthonette was missing. Penny contacted the police, and a search was started. Anthonette's sister, Wendy, actually gave her own account of what happened that night, and she told detectives that there was a knock on the door, and Penny, the mother, had told Anthonette to go and answer it. This was at around 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, morning, and when she answered it, two men, one of whom went by Uncle Joe, grabbed her as she was kicking and screaming and forced her into a brown van. And that was it. This version of events differs quite dramatically to the account that Penny initially gave, and after further questioning, Penny said that she had told Anthonette to go and answer the door, and she laid there for about 30 or 40 minutes, but Anthonette never came back. She got up to see where she was, and she couldn't find her. So that whole finding her missing at 7 a.m. when she woke up was apparently complete rubbish, and we may never have found that out if it weren't for Anthonette's sister. Then, 8 years later, Penny actually confessed to having been involved in Anthonette's disappearance. She asked, "What if I did this? Would I go to prison?" She stated that she and a man had gotten together to make a plan for the abduction. She said she wanted to know where the abduction would take place, but was told it was better if she didn't know. She admitted to knowing who was coming to take Anthonette, as well as having told Anthonette to answer the door that morning. Despite this confession, she was never charged with anything relating to Anthonette's disappearance, and sadly to this day, Anthonette has never been found. There were numerous apparent sightings of Anthonette over the years, with one account of a little girl matching her description, leaving a note in a restaurant saying, "Help me, call the police." 1 year after her disappearance, the local police got a phone call from a frantic young girl claiming to be Anthonette. She said she was in Albuquerque, but before the call could be traced, an adult voice was heard shouting, "Who said you can use the phone?" before the girl screamed and the phone call ended. Penny believed the voice to be that of her daughter, but said she didn't recognize the adult voice. And sadly, Anthonette has not been seen since. Anthropocene is a proposed geological epoch or period, starting from the time that humans had a significant impact on Earth's geology and ecosystems. It comes from the root word anthropos, meaning human, and was first proposed by Vladimir Vernadsky in 1938. Proposed start times for this period range from the agricultural revolution, so about 12 to 15,000 years ago, to as recently as the 1960s. The idea is that humans have so massively affected the Earth and its ecosystems that this should be its own period. Neither the International Commission for Stratigraphy nor the International Union of Geological Sciences has officially accepted or implemented this term or period, but it's possible they might start in the future. The Area 51 caller. So quite a few years before people like Alex Jones really became popular, there was a talk show host called Art Bell, who ran a late-night conspiracy theory radio show called Coast to Coast AM. He often discussed unknowns or mysteries in the universe, and would often take calls from various viewers. One morning in 1997, Bell took a call from a man who claimed to have previously worked in Area 51. He is widely known simply as the Frantic Man, because he was frantic. He sounded scared and panicked, saying that he didn't have much time and that they were going to triangulate his position. But I will just let you listen to it for yourself.
This is Coast to Coast AM, the largest live overnight talk radio program in America. Isn't that amazing? Online, you're on the air. Hello.
Hello, Art.
Yes.
Hi. I don't have a whole lot of time.
Well, look, let's begin by finding out whether you're using this line properly or not.
Area 51.
Yeah, that's right. Were you an employee or are you now?
A former employee.
Former employee.
I was let go on a medical discharge about a week ago, and I've kind of been running across the country. Oh man, I don't know where to start. They're gonna they'll triangulate on this position really soon.
So you can't spend a lot of time on the phone. So give us something quick.
Okay. Okay. What we're thinking of as aliens are they're extra-dimensional beings that an earlier precursor of the space program made contact with. They are not what they claim to be. They have infiltrated a lot of aspects of the military establishment, particularly the Area 51. The disasters that are coming, the military, I'm sorry, the government knows about them, and there's a lot of safe areas in this world that they could begin moving the population to now, Art.
But they're not doing anything.
They are not. They want the major population centers wiped out so that the few that are left will be more easily controllable. I started getting...
And suddenly, halfway through the call, the line dropped. Not only did the call cut out, which might have been a prank by the caller, but the entire station suddenly, mysteriously was forced offline, and they had to reset the station onto a backup system. Nothing like this had ever happened before in the station's history. And a few months after this call, the same man apparently called back again, saying that everything was fine, the original call was just a prank, a hoax, but the caller's voice now sounded slightly different, and the different tones and mannerisms of the guy seemed to call into question whether this was the same man that had called originally months earlier. Whether you believe in conspiracies or not, whether you believe in aliens or not, you have to admit that this caller's emotions and fear definitely seemed genuine, and it was awfully strange timing for the entire station to shut down, precisely when the caller was about to reveal who knows what. Atmospheric jellyfish are these floating jellyfish seen in the night sky all across the world. They look a little like UFOs, a little like actual space jellyfish, and NASA says they are apparently space debris reflecting off the northern lights, apparently. Some of the more notable sightings have been in the Netherlands, China, and Russia, but no proof as to their actual nature has ever been put forward. Badajoz UFO Incident. This refers to an incident that happened in Badajoz, Spain, 1965. Two soldiers were patrolling a fuel storage area of the Badajoz base when they heard a noise similar to radio interference. They followed the noise and eventually it became a loud, high-pitched whistling, and the whistling stopped after about 5 minutes, and then they saw a large, intense, bright light in the sky, and after a few minutes the light faded. By this point, another soldier had arrived with a guard dog, and the dog ran straight for an area that was emitting a sound. But soon after, the dog returned sick and scared, and the dog wouldn't leave the sight of the men, even after being instructed to. The dog just circled the three soldiers, which is a technique taught to the dog to protect the men when there is danger nearby. Suddenly, one of the soldiers saw a 3-meter tall being, human-shaped, incredibly bright, with very long arms and legs, and the soldier who saw this immediately fainted. The other two soldiers opened fire on this creature, firing around 40 or 50 bullets in total, and the bullets just made the creature shine even brighter, until after a while it faded into darkness. Then after a while the radio interference was heard again, and that was it. The entire base was searched the next morning, and what they found was incredibly weird. No bullet casings were found, nor were there any bullet holes in the walls near where the creature was. But the Air Force did say that the machine guns were indeed fired that night, and still to this day there has been no official answer regarding what the soldiers saw and what they fired at that night or where it came from. Banksy is the name of an anonymous street artist, originally from Bristol, England, whose real name and identity has remained a mystery for many, many years. Banksy started up in the 1990s, and while his early pieces were freehand, he said that one time while he was hiding from police under a rubbish truck, he noticed a stenciled serial number. So from that, he got the inspiration to stencil his work instead, and soon discovered it to be a faster, more efficient method of graffiti. Most of his pieces are hard-hitting and provocative, yet beautiful. Banksy said he was inspired by 3D, who is a graffiti artist and founding member of the band Massive Attack. And it's been theorized that maybe 3D himself is Banksy. It was also thought that Banksy could perhaps be the former host of the ITV Kids program Art Attack, who is Neil Buchanan, and this would be absolutely epic and hilarious if it were actually true. But the strongest guess for the identity of Banksy is a man called Robin Gunningham. He is a graffiti artist who was born and grew up in Bristol, and apparently several of Gunningham's former friends and schoolmates and acquaintances acquaintances have said that he is Banksy, with one even accidentally referring to Banksy as Rob in an interview. So while Banksy's identity remains technically a mystery, there is a fair amount of speculation and evidence for who he really is. The Big Muddy Monster was a creature first spotted in 1973, Murfreesboro, Illinois. At around midnight, Andy Needham and Judy Johnson were parked up near the Big Muddy River where they noticed a foul smell. As they turned around and looked out of the car's window, they saw a huge 7-foot monster staring right back at them. The creature was covered in white hair and mud and looked like it was possibly related to the Bigfoot. It had glowing red eyes, yellow teeth, and so the pair quickly drove away and filed a police report. Police investigated the area the next day and found what appeared to be large, narrow footprints. Later that same day, 2 other people reported seeing a monster on their parents' farm, which they described as 7 to 8 feet tall, 300 plus pounds, pale with dirty white hair, standing on 2 feet and emitting a musky odor. So after these sightings, the police chief decided to try and hunt down the creature. He took a group of men and search dogs and tracked the creature to an abandoned barn. As they approached the barn, the dogs stopped barking and refused to go inside. So the men went inside. But they said they failed to find the monster. The creature has been seen multiple times since then, one time with a couple even firing at the creature, then retreating into a small office as the creature banged on the walls of the office for over half an hour. The town has sort of a love-hate relationship with this monster now. On one hand, they are a teeny tiny bit scared, and on the other hand, they simply accept it as part of the town and its lore, painting murals of it and telling stories of its sightings. So, whether you believe it or not, the Big Muddy Monster does live on, at least in the lore of Murfreesboro. The body in the cylinder refers to the body of a man who was found in a partially sealed steel cylinder on a bomb site in 1945 England. It is believed that the body was there in the pipe undisturbed for around 60 years. The cylinder or pipe was a large tubular steel tube, and it was thought to be perhaps something like a ventilation shaft. In 1943, while clearing a church full of rubble and debris, bulldozers discovered and moved this cylinder and accidentally sealed it shut. So one side of the cylinder was actually sealed shut with a steel cap, and the other side of it was open-ended until it was crimped shut by the bulldozer. So this basically completely sealed it shut except for a 4-inch gap. And over the next few years, as kids tend to do, they played with the thing, pushing it up and down the street, rolling it around. Then, 2 years later, one of the kids decided to try and see what was inside the tube, and eventually he saw what looked like parts of a skeleton. Police were called, and they cut open the cylinder with a torch, revealing a complete human skeleton along with what seemed to be personal belongings. This man would have been around 6 feet tall when he was alive, and between 25 and 50 years old. He seemed to have died due to suffocation after crawling into the pipe, and was actually using a brick wrapped in a sheet as a pillow. He was fully clothed in a later Victorian outfit, and alongside the man were 2 diaries dated 1884 and 1885, but both of the diaries were largely illegible. They also found a postcard, a handkerchief, a brooch, and a gold signet ring with a red and green stone that carried the hallmark London 1859. Later that year, they named T.C. Williams as the potential identity for the body, based on some notes from the diaries. In 1885, T.C. Williams was a paint and brush manufacturer in Liverpool and had declared bankruptcy just a year earlier. So what likely happened is he had to declare bankruptcy, leave his home, and essentially sleep in a ventilation pipe, possibly on the work of his premises. But somehow the pipe became sealed and he suffocated to death. There was no inquiry into his death in 1885, as the body wasn't found, and they likely just thought that he had skipped town in order to escape the debt collectors. But the exact details of this case are likely just lost to time. Brianna Maitland was a 17-year-old girl who went missing in 2004, Vermont. The circumstances of her death were kind of strange, and she was acting acting a little odd on the day of her disappearance, on that fateful spring night. So a few weeks before her disappearance, Brianna was attacked at a party by a former friend, Keely Lacrosse. This was apparently due to Brianna interacting with a guy at the party, which made Keely jealous. And from this attack, she received a broken nose and a concussion. Ouch. On this particular morning, Brianna took an exam and then spent the day with her mother celebrating. She was out with her mum shopping and doing errands, and while in the checkout line of a store, something or someone outside caught Brianna's attention, and she went out, leaving her mother in the line. When her mum came out, Brianna seemed visibly shaken, unnerved, and agitated, and told her mum that she had to go home and prepare for her evening shift. Her mum said she didn't really want to pry, so she just left it at that. So Brianna completed her shift at the Black Lantern Inn and clocked out at around 11:20 in the evening. According to all the eyewitnesses of that night, Brianna then got into her car alone and went to drive home. But that would be the last time that she was ever seen. Police found her car the next day, forcibly reversed into the side of an old abandoned house, about a mile from her work. But she wasn't reported missing until 5 days later, as I guess she was known for not really responding straight away and for not always being home. And the police who found her car just assumed it was a drunk driver that had crashed the car and left the scene, which doesn't really make sense to me. And it's kind of wild that the police wouldn't try and locate or contact Brianna after this. Initially, it was thought that she might have run away, but after finding some essential items like her ATM cards and medication, the police suspected foul play and thought that she had possibly been abducted by multiple people. A week later, the police received an anonymous tip saying that Brianna was being held against her will in a house about 10 miles away. This house was rented by two known drug dealers, Ramon Ryans and Nathaniel Charles Jackson, and it was raided by police soon after receiving this tip. The men were arrested for their possession of drugs in the house, but no sign of Brianna was found. And some of Brianna's friends said that she had actually experimented with some drugs, and she did know Ryans and Jackson. Then the police received another tip with a signed affidavit that said in graphic detail how the two men had taken Maitland, murdered her, dismembered her, and disposed of her remains on a pig farm. This was apparently all over a money dispute that the two men had with Brianna, but the police say that they were unable to corroborate these claims. The family has received quite a few anonymous phone calls claiming that Brianna is tied to a tree or at the bottom of a lake or something, but none have ever panned out, and still to this day, Brianna is a missing person. Chase's vaults moving coffins. So this is an interesting legend about a burial vault in a church in Barbados. According to the legend, each time this heavily sealed marble vault was opened for the burial of a family member, all of the lead coffins had changed position. These were incredibly heavy lead coffins, and so moving them would take a considerable amount of force, or ghost power. This legend was first published in 1833 and told of these coffins as far back as 1808. These stories were never really and could never really be verified, but it is an interesting legend nonetheless. Christopher Case was the strange unsolved case of Christopher Case. He was 35 years old in 1991 and lived in Seattle. He worked for a radio broadcaster and was a fairly well-liked man. And while on a trip down to San Francisco for a work conference, Christopher met a woman that he really liked and clicked with. They talked for hours, and when the woman eventually decided to make a move on Christopher, he declined. This seemed to really upset the lady, and she became angry, saying that she was going to curse him and that he would be dead within the week, which seems like a bit of an overreaction, but maybe she just hadn't gotten any in a while. This apparently really upset Christopher, and he started calling friends, venting, and asking what he should do. He spoke to his psychic friend about curses, witchcraft, everything occult, and then ended the phone call. Fast forward about a week, and authorities were called to Christopher's apartment for a wellness check, and what they found was shocking. There were lines of salt along the base of each wall in the apartment, several crucifixes, and about a dozen burnt down candles. And the most shocking of all, they found Christopher dead in the bathtub. He had died from a heart attack or a curse made to look like a heart attack. Curses can be a little sneaky like that. And so this is where the case ended. And it all really comes down to whether you believe witches and curses exist or don't. In one case, the lady likely did put a death curse on him that he wasn't quite able to shake off. Or in the other case, Chris just scared himself silly, and in his hyper-paranoid state led to either a shock when he got into the bath, which led to a heart attack, or carbon monoxide poisoning from all the candles lit inside the apartment. Who knows? The Cup of Idiocy was a short film made up mainly of skits by Doug Walker, better known as the Nostalgia Critic. This was a home movie made in 1991, and it contained skits such as the Battle of Stupidity, Pointless Moments, the Unfit Firing Squad, a ribbon show, Late Late, So Late It's Early show, and The Last Man on Earth. This short film was thought lost forever until in 2010, Doug found a flash drive that may potentially contain Cup of Idiocy. We don't actually know if it did or not, and if Doug does have the full film somewhere, it doesn't look like he's intent on releasing it. Dick Hansen was a former college football star who had a strange, fatal encounter one April night in 1991. After going out for drinks in San Jose, California, he and his friend Gene left the bar in Gene's car at 1 a.m. They then drove to the restaurant where Dick had parked his car. While the two were parked up there, another car pulled up behind them. The mysterious man stayed in his car until Dick had gotten into his car, and when Dick and Gene drove off, so did the man right behind them. When they arrived at a set of traffic lights, they noticed that this man was following behind them very closely, as they made several left turns and changed lanes multiple times. This was starting to scare them. After a while, Gene pulled up beside Dick and asked him to go to the police. Dick apparently must not have heard her, and so they drove on for a while longer, with this guy close behind them. Eventually, Dick stopped his car, got out and went back to the man. Dick asked him what he wanted, shouted at the guy, and then Dick was shot. Twice. The man sped off, and Dick was dead by the time the paramedics arrived. The man apparently had the stature of a football player, and with Gene's number plate being 49R Hugs, which was a reference to the San Francisco 49ers, it was thought that this mysterious man might have been a fanatical fan of a rival team, but that's about as far as they got with this one, and to this day, the case remains unsolved. The Dyatlov Pass incident. Well, how the turns have tabled. So this was actually one of the first cases that I covered on this channel. Granted, my quality has gotten quite a bit better since then, but it was still a great case to cover nonetheless. In 1959, a group of 9 young but highly experienced hikers died mysteriously in the northern Ural Mountains, Russia. The hiking group was led by a man called Igor Dyatlov, who was a fantastic friend, leader, human, and hiker. The route they took was fairly usual, with only 1 or 2 minor detours, and according to their diaries, they were in fairly high spirits at the time and not really in any danger at all. That is, until February 1st, about a week into their hike, when they were suddenly forced out of their tent in the middle of the night by someone or something, either terrifying, powerful, or both. Due to them having to flee so suddenly, they were mostly severely underclothed, and they all died shortly afterwards, at least in part from hypothermia. Now, that is the shortened factual series of events, but the main mystery in this case is what exactly caused the group to flee. There wasn't really any sign of an avalanche, and the tent had been madly cut from the inside. This group was very experienced, so they had to know that leaving their tent in the middle of the night, like they did, with very little gear on, would likely be a death sentence. But they somehow decided that the danger of the elements out there was less than the danger that they were currently facing. They fled the tent, got to the bottom of the slope, and lit a small fire in the forest below, but it was sadly inadequate to heat the entire group, and so some of them died there, surrounded by the trees. Some died just a short distance away, having been crushed either by collapsing snow or by a powerful creature or beast. The others were found in between the fire and the tent, implying that they had maybe made some attempt to get back to the tent before succumbing to the cold. There are a few theories about this one, including but not limited to government tests, a Yeti attack, radiation madness, aliens, rogue criminals, and of course just natural causes. But there are many little details in this case, all pointing in seemingly different directions. So if you want a full in-depth version of this case, I would recommend you check out my earlier video and leave a comment there saying that you are in fact a time traveler. And that is all we have time for. This week's video has been a blast, and I have something very special coming for you all in just a few weeks. So stay tuned, look after yourselves, and as always guys, thanks for watching.